You know, maybe we entered a place that is not for the living to even visit. That's a stark, cold, dead place. If there is hell on earth, I think that was it. I got a call from my manager saying that you have received an offer to shoot a film in Santa Fe, to play a military captain who oversaw a notorious prison in Iraq, Abu Ghraib. We were shooting outside of Santa Fe in the old main prison facility, which has now obviously been closed down for many years. And when we got inside the lobby, to the right and to the left, there were giant hallways with gates. We proceeded down the hallway, and the producer said, "Would you like to take a little tour of death row and the gas chamber?" And I said, "Why the hell not?" We went through down the long corridor in order to get to death row. And when we finally got there, I flashed my flashlight down on the floor, and I saw marks in the concrete. There were about 10 of them, and they just looked like they were like hacking marks from a heavy object. And then we went to the other side, and we walked through death row. We went down one flight of stairs, took a left, went down another flight of stairs, and all I could hear was my own breathing and his breathing. When we got off the third flight of stairs, he turned around and said, "This is the back entrance to the gas chamber. This is where the gallery views the execution." So we walked into that room. We could see some light, and it was like an orange glow, a faint orange glow. And there was a candle burning in the corner, an old, red, smallish candle. The look on his face was terror. And I said, "Did you?" He said, "No." He said, "Do you really want to continue?" And I said, "As long as we're here, let's just continue." So then as I entered the gas chamber and turned around and sat down in the chair, I was shaking a little bit. I was a little bit sweaty and a little nervous, obviously. It's not every day you sit in a gas chamber chair. I heard a knock. And I turned around. In the viewing area, we saw black shapes sitting in chairs. We ran so fast. At the top of the stairs, there's the silhouette. And we froze, and we turned our flashlights off, and we just stared at it. And it started to spread its wings. And we were scared out of our minds, and there just seemed to be this noise. And then we looked up, and it started flying at us with this sort of prehistoric kind of guttural scream. And it came right at us. And we got down and covered ourselves and started screaming. And we felt it whoosh over us. We actually felt the wind over us. We hit the hallway. We ran. We just got in the car, took off. This was the scene in 1980 of one of the most violent and bloody prison riots in American history. 1,200 inmates overpowered 25 guards, took them hostage, and fought each other. They dragged one prisoner out of a cell in death row, and executed him in the spot where those marks were in the concrete. After hearing some of these stories and imagining the chaos, now it makes sense to me why we heard these noises down in the death chamber. Maybe it was some spirit allowing us to hear this so that we would tell this story so no one would ever go back in that place. And it's an experience I'll never forget.
I grew up in a county just northwest of London. The county's called Buckinghamshire. And it's a very, very old historical part of England. The house that I lived in was very, very old. And I think because of the house being so old, I think it had some, a bit of unknown history to us. My dad and I were watching TV again in my parents' bedroom. All of a sudden, we see this shadowy figure. It's about the size of a human. You can make out like human figure, but you can't make out detail. We shot up in bed and we looked down the hall. It started walking down the hall very quickly at like a brisk pace. Then it just stopped and disappeared. So I convinced a friend who is a clairvoyant medium. She claims to have been able to communicate and see spirits. And she came over one day and she's walking around the house and she starts to kind of tune in. And she says that there is a lot of spiritual activity here. And as we walk up the stairs to the 3rd floor, she stops. And she says in a very calm voice, "There's a man up here." There's a man up here. She's getting very serious, and she said that she doesn't know who he is, what he's doing there, but he's an older, stronger, man who wasn't ready to die when he did, and he is just not ready to leave. When we've looked into records of the house, during World War I and World War II, our house was a recovery hospital for injured officers. And when I told her about the history of the house being as it was a recovery hospital during the war, she kind of speculated that this was the spirit of a soldier who passed and, from his injuries. For me, that's kind of what made the most sense, because a lot of people died in World War I and World War II, and I can't imagine people left when they wanted to leave. They might feel like they have some unfinished business.
There was no discussion in my house about the supernatural or paranormal. The only thing that you could talk about as far as ghosts was maybe Casper. The area that I'm from was pretty much a historical area to grow up in. And there was one area where I lived that was still heavily wooded. One day, my sister and her friend took me to a certain part of the woods that I was sure I had been to before. But strangely enough, we came across a very old house. We were taken back because we'd been through these woods so many times, but had never seen this house before. I'm scared something bad could happen. But my sister and her friend were like, no, come on, we gotta go. We get to the front door, and it was large. It was heavy, and it was stuck. And finally, it sort of cracks open. So my sister and her friend go towards the staircase, and we sort of all get to the top at the same time. I started feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. And with that, all of us at the same time heard a very distinct noise downstairs, like movement. And, you know, we all looked at each other and we're like, you know, is there somebody there? So we're listening. And then there was another noise. Is somebody talking? That was it. We didn't scream, we didn't anything. All we could do was run. And I am trying to open it up. And I'm pulling on the door handle. And I can hear footsteps very distinctly. Heavy footsteps. I turned and I looked. I saw a man who was of strong, tall stature. And then there was a woman, and with them was a little girl. And they were walking towards me. And I was terrified. Because any minute, that's it, they're gonna get me, they're gonna get me, they're gonna get me, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And with that, the door flew open. And then my sister, I just remember her grabbing me, my hand, and just pulling me out. So later on in life, I remember hearing about a family. They were very close to where I lived that had been murdered around the 1920s. Some low life murdered this poor family. I was sure that's the family that I stumbled across that day in that dark, decrepit mansion.
In 1996, I broke up with a girlfriend and moved into the Chelsea Hotel, which is actually a very kind of appropriate place to go when you break up with someone. It is a very old hotel. It's probably one of the oldest in New York City. It's very big. It's one of those buildings that you feel has a lot of history, and you can kind of feel it in the air there. And I moved to the 8th floor. And there were a lot of very cool people that lived there, very interesting people, very smart and talented people. A couple of weeks after I'd been there and I started meeting some of the other residents. And I used to hang out with some of these other residents. And when I was introduced to some of these people, they asked me what floor I lived on. I said the 8th floor. And someone said, "Oh, have you met Mary yet?" No, I haven't met Mary. It wasn't just a straightforward, "Oh, you should meet this person." There was something, it was a little bit loaded. And I figured I'd know Mary when I'd see her because she would be some very distinctive person. But I didn't know this Mary, and I figured maybe I'll meet her at some point and whatever. A month or so after that, and I had been living at the hotel for about 2 months now. I stepped out of the elevator and I noticed the light in the hallway was dimmer than usual. I just noticed that. And then I heard very lightly sobbing of a woman. And all the way at the end was a figure of a woman in the corner, kind of hunched over, her head was down. She's crying. She was wearing a very long black dress that looked like something from 100 years ago, which wasn't really so outrageous at the Chelsea because you could see people wearing just about anything at that place. So that didn't really strike me as so outrageous. She was sobbing, so her shoulders were moving and her posture, it definitely looked like someone who was in a lot of emotional pain. It wasn't as if the sound was coming like directly out of her mouth or something. It's almost like the sound was just there. So I asked her if she was okay.
Are you okay?
I just called out, I said, "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" And right after I said that, from behind me, I heard a loud pop. I turned around immediately. The light bulb in the fixture had popped. I turned back around, and she was completely gone. So about a week, maybe 10 days later, I was in the bar again and ran into a couple of the people who mentioned this Mary. And I said, I think I saw the Mary you're talking about. As she was crying. She was outside her room. She was wearing this dress that looked like she was from 100 years ago. This one woman looked at me and said, Mary was a young woman, was in the Chelsea Hotel in 1912. She was from Buffalo, New York. And her husband and her husband's brother went to England on a boat to claim an inheritance. And she, rather than wait for her husband in Buffalo, decided to surprise him at the dock when the boat returned in New York City. So she traveled from Buffalo to New York. She checked into the Chelsea a few days before. Her husband had the misfortune to book passage on the Titanic. And finally, when it was confirmed that he had been killed, she went back to the Chelsea Hotel and hung herself in her room. I realized that she was obviously standing outside of the room that she was staying in, and to me, I would imagine that it was the last moments of her life, that maybe from the time she heard her husband was dead to the time she got back to the hotel, she was debating what she was going to do or how she was going to go on, if she was going to go on, and was battling with this demon, going back and forth whether or not she should. And maybe the last moments of this battle were there, right outside the door to her room. I just got really kind of creeped out, really scared. It was not what I thought it was. And the fact that I didn't know that it was a ghost the moment I saw it, I think made it even creepier. Anytime I hear anything about the Titanic, I think of, or the Chelsea Hotel, I think about that unfortunate poor Mary.